This is Dr. Sage, bringing you a discussion topic on Huna entitled I, Creator. The basic principle actually is the underlying framework foundation principle of Huna, is that you create your own reality. And all of the other, we have those other principles from that we usually talk about as 4 principles. Well, you can think of those, and they're interesting, they're good, and they're helpful as reminders, but the basic one is that you create your own reality. Everything else stems from that. We often say you're unlimited. Well, that if you create your own reality, of course you are. We often say that you get what you focus on. Well, if you create your own reality, yes, naturally. And we often say that your moment of power is now. Well, in any moment that you are creating your reality and you're doing it, yes, of course that's your moment of power, and that can only be now. So the fundamental one is that you create your own reality. And you may hear it said a lot, but it's really important that you get that into your gut, as the Kahunas would say. Now, gut knowledge, as a knowing. Because this is a revolutionary idea in terms of the present world consciousness, or what some people call the official way of thinking, the official line of consciousness. This is a revolutionary idea. Sometimes those of us who've been working with it for a while and use it all the time, and not in enough ways, but we use it a lot, we come up against or into contact with, because in Huna we don't come up against anything, it's the way of harmony. We come in contact with somebody for whom this shakes them to their roots. This idea that they've got any creative power at all in the way the world is, in the way their situation in the world is. Yet that's so fundamental. There are aspects of creativity that you participate in that consciously you have no idea how it's done. Those are deep and esoteric and important if you really go into the deep study of it. But I'm going to talk about day-to-day kind of creativity that makes up your life ordinarily as you know it. The deeper stuff is fun and important and exciting, but you've got to start from a foundation of a harmonious life of your own, that you are in charge of, where you can feel your power from moment to moment. So I say, you create your own reality. And you can say, I create my own reality, and that's nice sounding, but you create all your own actions. Every action that you take in this life, whether that's a spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical action, you have created that. No one else has. Every act you perform is your creation. And it's not unconscious. You might do some things out of what you call habit, but you can be conscious of them while you're doing it. And you created those habits. But you create every action. When you decide to do something, when you decide to come in here and sit down, when you decide to walk over to the door, when you decide to go out, when you decide to get up, when you decide to go to bed, those are all actions that you create. When you decide to get angry, when you decide to get unhappy, when you decide to move forward, when you decide to sit down and not move at all, when you decide to hide, those are all actions that you create. There isn't a single action that you don't create. Now, what about the things that I don't know what's going on? Or I do it automatically. Somebody gets me angry, somebody hurts my feelings. In Huna, those are impossible concepts. It doesn't work like that. Because you also create all your own reactions. All your reactions to other people, to circumstances, to the environment, to the past, to the future, all of those reactions that you have in life, you create them. You very specifically do it. Now, how do you do it? I had somebody I was talking to recently, and they were talking about how their feelings were just overwhelming. And from moment to moment, they just go into this a crying jag, or feeling helpless, or feeling powerless, and cry all over the place. And they couldn't stop their feelings, and they felt that their feelings were controlling them. Well, I helped them to realize in just a few moments dramatic change, because as she was going through the process and going through these different changes, I quick caught her. What are you thinking now? What are you saying now? And in this particular case, what she was doing was criticizing herself. There was a criticism in there just before every one of those outbursts of negative feeling. And then I immediately had her compliment herself. Okay? No matter what it was. I mean, you got fingernails, you got toenails, and that's a good thing. Whatever it was, anything. And she immediately calmed down and stopped crying. And with just over a short period of time, I was able to show her very definitely and clearly that the feelings weren't controlling her, that the feelings weren't something out of range that she had nothing to do with. She was creating those feelings by the criticisms. Well, nobody likes to feel criticized, and so of course you're going to feel bad. You're going to be upset, depending on how many criticisms you've piled on top, without any intervening compliments to give strength back. Yeah, you can get totally emotionally upset. But she was creating it. And she knew she was making those judgments about herself. What she didn't know, and which is why Huna's here, to let the unknown become known, what she didn't know was that the feelings weren't something separate all by themselves and entities under themselves. They were being generated by the words and the thoughts that she was having, that she was doing consciously. And she would say, I know, I'm doing this. I said, okay, stop. I don't know how. Give yourself a compliment. As soon as she'd do that, it would calm down, and she'd be good, and she'd start to feel good again. And if she gave herself a lot of compliments, then she'd start to feel a lot of good. If she just gave herself one or two, then it would change the feeling slightly. And I scared her. I really scared her. Because I said, it's possible. If you only give yourself compliments, to be happy 100% of the time. Well, there seemed to be something wrong with that. You see, there's a lot of beliefs in the world that somehow you shouldn't be happy all the time. That even some people who are happy all the time are missing something. I said, good grief, Yes, granted, thank you, I'll miss it. The unhappiness, the bodily tensions, the illnesses, all of those things that people have primarily come about from self-criticism. And that is an action that they create. And the reactions that come from that, the tension, the unhappy feelings, the illnesses, those are reactions that they also create. And if you can create those kinds of things, which is very easily shown that you do, you can uncreate them and create something different. In a simple way there, by praising, by blessing, by being good to yourself and good to others in the same way. This is a real interesting thing. Almost in every case where a person is highly self-critical, they are also highly critical of others. And they are critical of circumstances, and they are critical of the world, and they could have done it better, all this kind of stuff. The criticism just flows out all over them, and so they're naturally, if you start convincing your brain, your body, that the world around you is a terrible, horrible place, it doesn't want to be there. And so you're going to feel drained of energy, and you're going to feel like staying under the covers all day long, and you're not going to feel like being around people, and all of this kind of stuff. Why? Because you keep telling yourself how terrible it is. As soon as you make one single change toward noticing or acknowledging something good in the environment or in another person, one single little one, It breaks that change, and you start feeling good about the place. That's all it takes. Because, you know, it takes a lot of negative thinking to produce unhappiness, to produce illness in the body, to produce strains in relationships. It takes a lot of negative thinking. You have to be really persistent at that and build up a lot of it and really develop the habits. It doesn't take very much positive stuff. Okay. It doesn't take very much praise, compliments of yourself and others to create the change. To start feeling good about people, good about yourself, good about life. Just takes a little bit, because that's the natural bent of things. That's the natural bent of things. When you were born in this life, you were not born self-critical. You weren't born critical at all. I mean, even you may have had experiences in the womb that you can go back and remember or think you remember. It doesn't matter which. But you had to learn after, excuse me, you had to learn afterwards how to be critical, how to criticize, how to make something wrong or bad. You had to learn that. That's not natural. A lot of things human beings learn. Some of them are effective and some are not. But being a critic is not a natural part of you. And I'm using critic in this negative sense, where you're making something wrong. That's not natural. And as soon as you stop doing it and start making more things right, wow, life starts to flow, health starts to come back, relationships start to heal over, motivation starts to rise up, you feel good about yourself, about your life, your mind clears, your energy flows, you become more effective. How amazingly simple. But it becomes truly effective when you realize the foundation that it's on, that you're creating the actions and reactions. It's your responsibility. It is your creativity doing it. And it doesn't do any good to get into that halfway funk that says, oh, look what I've created, because that's a criticism. There you are, back to that again. Okay. You got to go all the way or it doesn't do any good at all. Well, I created this, now I'll create something different. That's the whole point of it. So, you create those, your actions and your reactions, and you also create your attractions. Now, what does that mean? That means, this is based on a fundamental idea in Huna, that we can put it in any kind of different ways. Telepathy is endemic. Well, it's a natural characteristic of the human population, of humanity, of the earth itself, not just humans, but we're talking about us humans. By the kinds of thoughts that you have, the kinds of feelings that you have, what you decide to focus your attention on, okay, all of those things, you are creating the kinds of people in your life and the way that those people act toward you, you're creating. In another way, you could say you're creating your reactions toward those people. But in many terms, you are also creating the way that those people act toward you. Are they participating? Of course they are. Just as you're participating in the way you act and react toward other people. But your kind of thinking that goes broadcasting out or goes beaming out, depending on whether you're being specific or non-specific in your ideas, pulls into your life the kinds of circumstances that you have. Attracts you to places like this where you can hear knowledge like this. Okay? This wonderful, beautiful group of people. Attracts you to all the other kinds of places in your life. To the people you live with a long time, to the people that you happen to meet momentarily on the street. The ones you pass by with maybe even hardly noticing. All of those, too, you've attracted into your life. And you're playing that same role in theirs. But you probably know and can realize in your life how you act one way toward some people and a different way toward others. And so sometimes you feel, well, that person makes me happy, and that one over there makes me angry all the time. There's only a partial truth in that. They don't really make you do anything. You're responsible for your own reactions. However, they are putting out certain kind of vibes that you react to. Whether they're doing it verbally or whether they're saying anything or not. They are putting out certain kind of vibrations, telepathic emanations, whatever you want to call them, that you tend to react in certain ways to. If you change inside what you're thinking and how you're reacting, you can totally change your reaction, totally change sometimes what that person's doing. Because they no longer have an audience for that kind of behavior. Because we're all getting feedback from our environment, including the people in it. And if you're not being an audience, you're not giving them that feedback to encourage, and I don't mean even necessarily positively. Sometimes there's a negative kind of encouragement that keeps people doing something. If you're not giving that anymore, they will stop doing it. They will either stop doing it and change, apparently to you, change their personality, or they'll fade out of your life. Because you won't be vibrating at their frequency anymore. That is literally how certain people come in and out of your life. Have you ever noticed sometimes how old friends will just suddenly out of the blue call back, get in touch with you again, come into your life in some way again? That's because you've shifted into a frequency with your thinking that's again similar to theirs. Either similar to the way it was or similar to the way they've become since. And there they come back again. Everything in your life, we're speaking particularly about the kinds of people and the way they act toward you, but also the kind of environment you live in, where you live in. You create it. You attract it. You are the person who's having the kinds of thoughts, who's making the kinds of decisions, who's feeling things that pull that stuff into your environment. And so it is your creative act that's going on. You also create, we can call this one, by your contemplations. A fancy word for paying a lot of attention to something. The kinds of things you dwell on most. You're creating more of that in your life. Very simply, in a way, if you dwell on lack as a fact of life, you will tend to experience a lot of lack in your life. If you dwell, whatever kind of way that you dwell, the kind of basic assumptions that you have about life, and you keep looking at life in that way, that's how you'll set life up. Now I'm going to give a little different aspect of this, and this one is not necessarily right or wrong, but show you even on a very esoteric level how this happens. Among the shaman, which I was trained as a shaman by several quite different cultures. But I'm going to give you a comparison here between let's say the American Indian shamans. Okay? Very good, very deep, very spiritual people, but they have a way of looking at the world. And you often hear the warrior connection, given in this, the spiritual warrior, or the warrior shaman or something like that. All right, now, what is this done for? Okay? This, when you look at the world as a warrior, even a spiritual warrior, you have to create enemies. Now, the enemies may be your own fears, maybe the fears of the world, maybe a sorcerer who's trying to steal something from you, maybe, there's all of this idea about stealing power, and all done from a highly spiritual point of view. This is not a criticism, okay, that I'm speaking here, but it's demonstrating that this is a way of looking at the world, and if your way of looking at the world is as a warrior, that can bring out qualities of courage, of strength, and lead you to tremendously increase your awareness. The samurai who followed Zen did this same kind of thing, used it as the way of a warrior. Okay? And so it tremendously increased their awareness, because they had to be aware somebody could come up from behind and lop off their head. And as a spiritual warrior in the Indian tradition, you've got to be aware so that the enemies regardless of what that's, spirits or things sent from another source. It keeps you on a real high awareness sense, enables you to use a lot of courage, presents tremendous challenges for you to overcome, and in the overcoming of which you increase your abilities. And so there's a great deal of strength and power and all kinds of stuff in that way. But if your assumption is that this is the way things are, then that's the way you'll set things up. And so they have all of these kinds of interplays. The kahunas have a different way. It isn't one of a warrior. It is one of the English words aren't so great here, of expertise. I mean, these are all masters, but here it's a question of gaining expertise. Something like gaining skill, like you would gain skill at, learning a sport, or navigation, or doing a canoe, or learning a skill of healing. And in this kind of thing, enemies are not part of it. It's a way of harmony, not here presenting one as better than the other, but it's different here. Okay? And it's a way of learning how to match energies with something and then change yourself so that they change. And not one of confrontation. It brings a different kind of courage, a different kind of challenge, a different kind of developing awareness than the other way does. But yet the aims are all the same, and the shamans undergo many similar kinds of experience. But their fundamental viewpoints are different, and so the framework that they have is different, and the ways they approach things then will also be different. Well, in your life, the same thing applies in your daily life. If you see life as a dangerous arena, then you will tend to be, in various circumstances, aggressive or defensive, because you've got to deal with life in that way. If you change your assumptions about the way life is, and you don't see life as a dangerous arena, but as a fascinating adventure, then you'll be approaching life in a completely different way. Now, maybe you like that edge of the preparous confrontation, competition kind of thing. Some people do. They thrive on that. Some people try to follow that, however, and it's downhill. They're not built for it. They're doing it because somebody said they should. I've just given you two examples. There are many kinds of assumptions that you can have around the world, about the world, because you create those assumptions. You decide what the world is and what the world isn't. And by that way, you define and structure the very essence of your own life. Again, the kinds of relationships you will have, the kind of life you will lead, the kinds of thrills and joys, experiments and experiences that you'll have. You're the creator. If you can get this fundamental idea into your system, it's going to be such a liberating thing. You can discover what your assumptions are about life and consciously choose them or not choose them. If you decide you like those basic ones and that's the way you want to go, you're free. But you also realize that other people may have different assumptions that can be just as valid. There's only one general truth about the world. It is. Anything you add on to that is your creation. Now, maybe you add on the same kind of thing that a lot of other people do. That's okay. Just because a lot of people say the world is such and such, that doesn't mean it isn't different for other people. Okay? Majority rule is only one political system, even in the internal politics. You create every bit of essence of your world, but if you can remember that you create primarily your actions and reactions in any particular moment, you can feel yourself beginning to feel a certain way, to act a certain way, to react a certain way, and say, oh, I'm creating this. This is really enlightening and freeing when you start doing this. I'm creating this, or I created that. You got a pain? You say, oh, well, I'm creating that. And then you can kind of just make a little shift, and you can say, okay, stop creating that. And the things go away. It's amazing. If you are of the assumption or the belief that you have no power over that, then it will keep telling you something. It'll keep coming at you, it'll keep increasing, till maybe you have to go see somebody with the power. Now it's terrific and it's fine and it's great to go get hired help. I'm hired help for a lot of people because I know some things about the mind and about energy and about bodies and so forth. And so people can come to me and say, hey, how's this work? And I say, it works like this. Great. Doctors and attorneys and all these kinds of people out in the world, teachers of all kinds, they're hired help. You're the creator, not them. They don't have the power in your life. You do. That's good to gather with them together sometimes and share power and do things and learn from them and use things. But you've got the power. You're the one. It is your life. You and I are creators. Aloha.